Some of the nation's most prominent Democratic governors took the stand at a House oversight hearing.
They defended Los Angeles and so-called sanctuary policies that they say are under siege by the Trump administration.
An overreach of epic proportions.
The President of the United States goes in over the top to grab our National Guard for domestic security. That is taking away the rights and obligations of a governor.
And with more, we are joined by former LA County Sheriff Alex Villanueva. Hi, nice to have you with us. We appreciate your time. Let's begin with the big breaking news. A judge ruling for California and Governor Newsom and against the Trump administration over deploying the National Guard to LA. What is your reaction?
Well, I think that judge is somehow missing the issue about 1965. There was a precedent when Governor Wallace blocked the Supreme Court's decision on integrating public schools. President Lyndon Johnson was forced to use the National Guard to allow black school children to enter previously segregated schools. And today is nothing different. The topic may change, but the issue is the governor and local law enforcement refused to come to the aid of federal agents when they were trying to do their legitimate job. And they refused to protect federal property, for example, the Metropolitan Detention Center. So there is a very strong precedent in this regard. Might not be popular, however, the law is the law.
The other big headline today, you're well aware of the forcible removal of Senator Alex Padilla at the Secretary Noem press briefing. You called the senator's actions fake outrage?
Yes, I did. I mean, it was calculated. If the cameras were not rolling, you would never have heard of Padilla doing what he did. And that's just, it's kind of embarrassing. There's a time and a place to address and have a conversation with the Secretary of Homeland Security. But in front of the cameras to put a big show on, it was the dignity of.
So, sir, in the last few days, you've talked about rule of law, saying Governor Newsom and Mayor Bass are looking to nullify federal law through their sanctuary policies. What exactly do you mean?
Well, the sanctuary policy has been put in place at the city level, the county level, and the state level in California, going back at least a decade. All of these policies have given the false sense of security among the undocumented population that somehow federal law did not apply anymore. Well, federal law has not changed over the last 10 years. You have to go all the way back to Reagan's time in office in the early 80s when immigration laws were set and established. They haven't changed. So that false sense of security generated the outrage we see today about federal immigration agents actually enforcing federal law. So they're on solid legal ground doing what they're doing. We may not like it, but that's something that needs to be addressed in Congress. It needs to be addressed legislatively, not through, throwing bricks at cops.
You, having served as sheriff of Los Angeles County, how have you seen sanctuary policies impact the job of local law enforcement?
Well, this makes it kind of difficult because we understand the separation of local law enforcement from federal immigration enforcement, and that's fine. They both have a job to do, a very important job. They just can't do it together. It's like mixing oil and water. That shouldn't be. But one should not obstruct the job of the other by the same token. And SB 54 is a prime example of that.
Back in 2020, as sheriff, you announced a policy banning LA County Sheriff's deputies from turning over undocumented immigrants who commit crimes to ICE, something the first Trump administration asked you to reconsider. So can you explain your shift on sanctuary policies today?
Well, two things happened. One, Biden's administration's open border policy dumped an additional 8 to 10 million undocumented and unvetted onto our nation. And they represent a security threat, not just to U.S. citizens, legal residents, but also to the undocumented population that's been living here for decades. They are a physical threat. And the only way we can do it, that there's roughly 600,000 criminal aliens among those 10 million plus that came over the borders. They need to be apprehended. They need to be transferred to ICE and deported. And I don't think anyone has any objection to that. The issue is criminal arrest warrants. I asked ICE to do this 5 years ago. They're doing it today. And that's exactly what we need to see happen.
Moving from local sanctuary policy to federal immigration policy, do you think the raids and the deployment of federalized troops to LA have been taken a step too far?
Well, if the federal troops are deployed to guard public facilities, federal facilities like the Metropolitan Detention Center, the federal courts, all these places that were the target of, major acts of vandalism, it is very appropriate in that regard. Now, taking them from that to onto the streets to confront the rioters and doing crowd control, that's a bridge too far, I think. And I'm okay having local law enforcement do that. That is their primary role, and they should be involved doing that.
So what about the military, the Marines?
The Marines, I'm okay with the National Guard. The Marines, I think they're not trained for that role. The National Guard is more trained for that role and more appropriate. So I'm comfortable having the National Guard fill that role.
There are roughly 1 million undocumented residents in Los Angeles, depending on who you talk to. What do you think should happen to them?
Well, I think this is where Congress has to get off their rear ends and start a comprehensive immigration reform policy to create a pathway to citizenship for those who've been living here for decades, who've been contributing to the economy, who did not have a criminal record. I think everyone is okay with that in some form or fashion. That is an appropriate legislative response that needs to happen, not this grandstanding from Congress or for the governor. Let's get to the root of the problem. Let's fix it so that we have a clear distinction. Who's here legitimately, and who's here to cause harm. Look at the burglary tourists coming from South America, prime example.
All right, former LA County Sheriff Alex Villanueva, nice to see you. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
You got it.
Thanks for being here.